Good morning and afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us today for another webinar on the latest cyber attack. Andrew Bagrin will be explaining how Petya is a bit different than WannaCry. Since we've got quite a bit of attendees, we're actually going to unmute and have an open discussion for the webinar. If you would like, you are still able to type in questions in the chat at the right. And without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Andrew.
Thank you very much, Matt. Everybody, welcome. Thank you for joining. So we had, and I'm going to ask everybody, maybe let's just mute everybody for right now, and then after, whenever we get to the questions part, we can do the unmute, just so that we, reduce the noise, the background noise there. But thank you everyone for joining. We are going to talk about Petya or not Petya, or maybe Petya, or all the other names that has been given here. And you'll kind of understand why it's been given so many names. Is it really a ransomware like WannaCry was? And WannaCry was the first of this new type of attack. I'll kind of go through each part of it and help understand what it is and how that affects you, and what can we expect in the future, and really why, right? Why is a good question always to answer. So it's going to get started here. So earlier on, we got some reports, and it's like, hey, there's another ransomware, and it's using the Eternal Blue exploit from the CIA leak that happened earlier. So it was exactly the same as WannaCry for spreading. They used that part of it for the worm. And not only that, it used a different malware that it sent across, and it looked like one that was used previously called Petya, and that's why instantly it got that name. We saw right away things like grocery stores with all of their terminals encrypted, and the question was, like, you got to be kidding me. Didn't we just go through this? Don't people patch their systems? This is a patch that's been available from Microsoft now for quite some time. What the heck is going on here? And this spread really, really fast. In fact, we had so little information. Initially, I talked to a couple of friends. One of my friends, he runs the research at RSA for threat intelligence. Another friend of mine, he runs the FortiGuard Center. And I contacted both of them and just asking them what they've seen, if they decompiled the malware, and kind of the analysis of it. And there was a little bit of confusion because there was another malware out there at the time, and they were getting a little bit of mixed results until they can fully decompile it and look at it. And even I posted things like this. I mean, on Facebook, old malware. Did I miss something here, or are we really that screwed up, in our security? And that's kind of what it seemed like. And as a couple of days passed and we learned more and more about this, we realized that there was more to it than just what it seemed like. And I want to kind of go through the steps. And if you've seen the explanation of WannaCry, you'll kind of understand the difference. If you didn't, I encourage you to watch the recording of the webinar to understand exactly how WannaCry was different than other ransomwares. So just to go through the steps here, so this kind of all started with a software system. This is an accounting package called MyDoc, and this is an accounting software that's used primarily in Ukraine. In fact, it's over there, you almost have to use this software package, or if you're dealing with Ukrainian companies, you have to use them. So the update server for MyDocs was hacked, and it contained this Petya virus on it, and it pushed out an update to all of the systems that were using this thing. So it was a small update, 333K. And what happened is whenever a machine's infected, you didn't really know at first, and it didn't come up and tell you right away, but it did start spreading like a worm would normally do. And it spread using two methods. In Eternal Blue was the first method. This is that exploit, the vulnerability that everybody knows about, that WannaCry used. And seeing this initially said, oh, it's the ransomware, it's like WannaCry, patch your systems, everybody. But looking further into it, that was one of the methods. The second method was actually quite a bit more complex and very interesting, and that was taking the credentials off the system using two different methods. One of the methods was actually the ransomware. It downgraded a service on the Windows so that it could grab unencrypted credentials, and the other one was using LSA dump, which is another method known to pen testers whenever they would try to grab clear text credentials from a system, specifically a Windows system. So it would grab the credentials, and then it would use those credentials to actually go across the network to other systems and infect itself. So this is not a vulnerability, but an authenticated connection using Microsoft File Share, and is looking for administrative credentials and the admin $ share, which allows you to remotely control the system. And that's how it spread so quickly. And then after spreading and after infecting the machines, it took it a good hour and a half. It actually, the code there did a reboot in an hour and a half, and meanwhile it was sitting there and it started overriding the master boot record and encrypting the files. So there's a couple things to note here. And then of course once it reboots, it comes up and bam, you get the message, right? And it's there, and it's already too late. So there, a couple things to note here is, number one, is there's multiple attack vectors here. It spread in multiple ways. Number one, first, it spread from the update. That was the initial launch of it. From there, it spread using the vulnerability, the WannaCry vulnerability, Eternal Blue. And then the third was it's capturing the credentials off the system and spreading that way. So there's multiple ways to spread. And the reliability of how well it spread, they said that they looked at it, and it was as much as 5,000 endpoints in under 15 minutes is how fast this thing can spread. And of course, once you reboot it, bam, you get the message. So with all of this, it's what about the ransomware part, right? It's we kind of stopped hearing about that, or we heard a little bit about it. So initially, there was an email, this email address that said, contact this email address to pay the ransom and to get your files back. And that email address was deleted pretty quickly. It was removed or disabled pretty quickly. So all of a sudden now you didn't have a way to contact it. And when they looked at it, there was approximately $5,000 paid total. It was $300 in Bitcoin per instance. And there was a total of about $5,000 paid for this ransom. Not a lot of money, right? In fact, it's ridiculously low. But nobody actually recovered their files. In fact, recovery was not part of the plan. It was basically faking itself as a ransomware, but there was no way to recover the files. The interesting part is with WannaCry, there was no C2 and it used a common key, and that's why WannaCry, eventually somebody came up with a decryptor because it was a one type of encryption or one key for everybody. With this, typically, whenever you want to have different encryption keys, so you can't decrypt, somebody can't come up with a decryptor and then everybody's good. That's why there's C2 servers. There's the command and control where they go and they grab the unique key and then they go, okay, the system's encrypted like this. And that's that C2 part, that communication is typically where we could see that, block it, and then prevent the encryption from happening. But here, recovery was actually not part of the plan. And when you look at it deeper, it's like you start asking yourself, well, what was it built for? And like if they didn't want to collect money, what was the deal? And who was the target? A lot of people got hit, but a lot of people in Ukraine got hit. And a lot of people are saying, yeah, this is actually less of a ransomware, and this falls more in the category of a cyber weapon, similar to Stuxnet. Who made it? Was it the Russians targeting Ukraine? Maybe. Why did they not cover the tracks better? Was it somebody that wanted to make it look like the Russians were attacking Ukraine and try to start a retaliation? We see it in the movies, but hey, all the bad guys get their ideas from the movies, right? So all of that stuff, there's rumors out there, and we're not quite sure. There's not a definitive place you can point your finger to and say, aha, it was them. And probably you guys have seen stories about Kaspersky as well, and what's going on there, and FBI is interviewing employees and all kinds of stuff. Again, I'm not sure what the deal is there. I don't think anybody really knows. It's all speculation. But it's definitely interesting times and very interesting stuff happening. So again, this is less of a ransomware and more of a cyber weapon. And it gets interesting because, okay, well, that the attack was on Ukraine. It wasn't on us. Yes, other people got hit with it, and they got hit pretty badly. And again, it's like you can't just pay the Bitcoin and get your files recovered. You're kind of really, really screwed. Now, there was a thing. They said there's no kill switch, but there is a vaccine. And probably some of you heard that. So the vaccine is kind of like not really a vaccine, but it's something that you could do simple to prevent Petya from infecting your machine or doing what it's supposed to do. And again, this just works with this one instance, and that's it. This is definitely not a security measure by any stretch of the imagination for the future. But it wrote a file in your Windows directory called perfc, and it relied on being able to write to that file as it's doing stuff. And so if you create a file with that name and mark it as read-only, so it can't actually go in and write to it, it'll prevent Petya from actually being able to execute properly. So that's really what they call the vaccine part of it. Not really a vaccine, just something to prevent it from the code for fully executing there. So with all that, I can ask a few questions, like who did it, why, and how does that affect you? Well, who did it? We already talked about. We don't know who did it. It could have been state-sponsored, maybe not. We're not sure what the end game is, right? It may have been just an attack on Ukraine. It might have been, something that just somebody's trying to trigger something for the future to create something where they're going to make even more money and kind of disguise it as something. Why did they do it? Again, who knows? I'm sure we'll find out. But the important part is, when we find out, what does that mean to us? How is it going to affect us? How does it affect your customers, right? And the question that I keep asking is, man, I remember the days when viruses, they were simple, right? We were just kind of a bunch of kids fooling around, writing scripts, doing fun stuff like, getting somebody's CD drive to eject, while they're sitting there doing nothing or changing the screen or something like that on them. But how did the bad guys get so good at being bad? This is almost like from a cartoon or something. And they got really, really good at being bad. And why is because they're being crowdfunded. Like, what does that mean they're being crowdfunded? Like, well, think about this. How many people do you know paid the ransomware last year? Right? A lot of them. Now, the FBI reports it was over 1 billion that was reported to them. Every time when I ask a group, I get like of people who actually got ransomware and reported to the FBI, it's less than 5% that reported to the FBI. You could extrapolate that and say, okay, it was more like 100 billion. I mean, I don't know, it's definitely more than 1 billion, and it's most likely more than 10 billion. But that amount of money, you could do a lot of code writing, you could do a lot of design, you could do a lot of damage for the future. Right, and any good entrepreneur, any good leader of any kind of organization is going to reinvest that money back into what makes them the most money, and that's exactly what they're doing. So in essence, we've been enabling them to attack us better if our strategy is pay the ransom, right? So that's one thing we got to stop doing as a whole, as a country, just as an industry, is we got to stop enabling the attackers to be able to attack us even better. And because the more we do that and the less we enable our allies to defend us properly, it's a losing battle, right? We just keep paying the mafia, and they keep coming back and keep coming back instead of trying to stop paying them and enable the good guys to be able to do their job better. So if there is a message here, it's enable your allies, right? Go to your customers. It's like, look, we got to start making it better, right? One step at a time. We're going to do these 5 things, and you know what? There's really nothing's 100% foolproof, but we need to start doing these 5 things. Why? Because it's like if we build a foundation and we start building towards better security, we'll always get better. But if we sit there and do nothing, number one, we're going to get a lot worse, right? Number one is we're extremely vulnerable, but we're going to get a lot worse because we're always enabling the bad guys to come up with better and bigger attacks. And eventually he's going to hit us so hard, he's going to kill us. So how can you build a good solid foundation? So let's talk about it. I shared this a little bit before, and this is kind of where MDS comes in a little bit. Ransomware, it's how do you block ransomware? Well, antivirus is the way to block it. We do it at the gateway if you do it at a host. But basically, your virus definition file should be able to pick up the ransomware file, the actual malware, and be able to block it. A lot of times there's phishing URLs involved in the ransom worms. There's usually not. Sometimes there is, but there's usually like a phishing URL or something. Good web filtering will do that. And again, that's what MDS does a part of that. Usually there's C2 or botnet communication to go and update itself, to download keys, whatever the case may be. IPS and app control usually are the functions there that block that. And then there's a worm part, if there is a worm part. And the worm part, we've had signatures for this vulnerability, I think it was back in January or February. So we've been blocking that specific eternal blue worm now for a long time. Now, here's the difference. So this is kind of like all UTM functionality. And when it comes to UTM, it's, in my mind, it's the UTMs, they grew up so quickly and so fast, and all of this functionality got put in, and there's things that they call a UTM because it's a buzzword, and it's really not, because it doesn't have all the proper functionality in there. It's kind of more of a more sophisticated router or some filtering. And even then, it's like when you get a pretty sophisticated UTM, you start running into some problems. And this is the problem, you guys have probably heard this before. I call it the trichotomy. You have a box on-prem, and you're going to have to make a choice. You either spend a lot of money, or you're going to have to reduce your security, or you're going to have to reduce your performance. And this is getting worse and worse and worse every day. And this is where MDS changed the architecture to fix this problem. So, number one, also, if you're blocking all the stuff down at your prem, well, you're getting a lot of what we call bandwidth pollution, because close to half of all the traffic out there on the internet is non-human. It's all bots. Whether they're good bots, bad bots, there's a lot of bad bots, scans, probes, whatever, discovery tools. They're all running, and they take up almost half of your bandwidth, right? And if you're blocking it down at the bottom at your prem, you're killing half of your bandwidth by allowing those things to go across your bandwidth before you block them. So MDS is different because we moved that perimeter, we moved it up and virtualized it. And there is a lot of advantages to doing this. Number one is obviously we're blocking all the traffic, and then of course 68% of all web traffic is advertising, and we're blocking all of that way up in the network and reducing that bandwidth pollution down on your internet connection down here, and freeing up that bandwidth to be able to use for the things that it needs to be used for. On top of that, because we are up in the network, we're now not limited by a physical box and the performance of it. So everything can run at wire speed, full inspection. And what this does, this enables us to provide all of the filtering, and none of the reduced security, provide all of the filtering, without impacting performance. And how much it's reduced is actually pretty amazing whenever you start looking at what's going on a prem type box. And I'll give you some examples here. So looking at, if I just take for instance a Fortinet, and you look at their, like, say 3000 series versus like an 80, 90 or a 60, the smaller boxes, you can't even enable anything except for the active database, active antivirus database. And if you look at the signatures between that and their extreme database, it's actually, I put 90%, but you're getting actually less than 5% of the signatures in the active one. And on those smaller ones, you can't even enable the extreme. On the 60s and I believe the 90s, you can't even enable the extended. But even on the larger, like the 300, you can't even enable the extreme database, which has all of the signatures there. So that's part of that reduced security. Right. Again, Fortinet's probably one of the better ones at doing UTM, has some of the best threat intelligence, and they try to, that 5% of the signatures is probably the most important ones for you to have. But again, it's reduced by quite a bit. On top of that, a lot of the on-prem boxes, they just have certain defaults that you can't even change, right? And a lot of people don't even change them. But I'll give you a couple quick examples. The one I use, that there is a lot of IPS tweaks. And there is there's some AV tweaks as well. And the most easiest one to understand is a a lot of these gateways, they have a file size limit of 10 meg to scan the file, and if it's above 10 meg, it just passes it through unscanned. Well, the smaller boxes, they don't even allow you to change that default. Now, if I'm a bad guy writing malware, I know this, and all of my malware is going to be 11 meg, because guess what? I can get through a big chunk of UTMs, especially if I'm attacking the SMB segment. Well, 11 megs, and now pretty much every UTM out there for the SMB segment is completely useless in being able to detect my virus. And a lot of them have pretty complex configuration, and this actually accounts for a big part of the breaches. Is the tools were there, it was set up, it was turned on, but it was misconfigured. The subscription wasn't renewed. That something went wrong. Even if it was set up initially correctly, at some point somebody changed something, and it ended up being misconfigured, and that accounts for a lot of the mistakes out there, a lot of the breaches. So overall, how much does that reduce your security when you look at all of these things by using an on-prem CPE-based UTM versus what we call elastic UTM, which is the network-based UTM? And I don't have a real number there, but it's by quite a bit, by a lot. And this is why not only do we provide all of this protection, but we also back it up. And with the new OmniWAN, it's up to $100,000 for a breach. So basically, Assurant backing us, and if your customers get breached while they're using MDS, they're covered up to $100,000. And this includes all kinds of stuff, including if you need to go on site and do recovery work, restore data from backups, clean machines, whatever the case may be, it completely covers all of your time, your work, and everything that's involved in that. And a lot of you probably know about our Elastic UTM meets SD-WAN. So this is the industry terms, Elastic UTM and SD-WAN. For us, it's OmniShield and OmniWAN. So OmniShield is our Elastic UTM. That's the part that provides all of the protection, all of the inspection, all of the security, is your perimeter. OmniWAN is the SD-WAN portion. So if you look at these two pictures, the one on the left would show you, typically, here's what you see. First of all, a big chunk of your bandwidth is being used by all of this traffic that you don't even want, all of these bots and scans, probes, and everything else. And the rest of it, it is so unorganized, and it's like this is why everything feels slow. Not necessarily because you have not enough bandwidth, but because it's so unorganized and everything is just chaotic across that line. And what OmniWAN does is first, it relies on OmniShield to block all of the stuff that's not needed there, but then it takes and organizes all of your traffic appropriately, makes it look like a nice, clean 6-lane highway, fast lanes, slow lanes, and everything else. And that's really what that optimization will give you: the best performance, the best experience overall on your internet connectivity. And putting the two together, really, this is the piece that it's synergistic and makes things happen extremely, extremely well. But our topic today is really about ransomware. So if you have any questions, we could probably open it up. Matt, if you want to open up the bridge there, we can start asking questions, or if somebody's typed any questions. And if you want to unmute yourself, Matt.
That would be a good idea. Let's start with the first question. And did you want to open it up? If we do open it up, I highly recommend that everybody mute their mics locally, because as soon as we unmute you on here, we're going to hear deep breathing and anything else going on.
It is Friday.
It is Friday. So let's start. There's one question here. You said that Petya reused previous methods. Do you foresee more attacks utilizing old tactics or viruses? And would a traditional UTM keep the security precautions for these older methods?
Yeah, that's a great question. So a lot of the attacks are based on old vulnerabilities. You don't see a lot of zero-day type of attacks where there is no signatures, there's no defense. The majority of them are using old vulnerabilities, old stuff that's able to be detected. And a good UTM that has all the proper threat intelligence will be able to block all that stuff. So properly deploying a UTM It's that piece that gets you, like, it's the foundation really. It's laying the foundation for proper security. And yeah, absolutely, I see this happening over and over again. And what the big part that I really see is going to happen is combining these methods, like similar like with WannaCry. It was ransomware combined with a worm, right? We called it ransom worm. With Petya, it had a few other things in there, and that's what made it so crazy and very, very scary. And as time goes on, I see people really combining those things and making much more sophisticated attacks, more sophisticated systems to build these type of attacks, and we'll see them more often.
Beautiful. Okay. At this moment, I'm going to unmute the attendees. To create an open forum, feel free to ask any questions regarding this latest attack or our products and services. There was a question about a recording of the webinar. Yes, we are recording, and it will be sent to all registrants and attendees.
Does the 100K guarantee cover viruses, malware, etc.? Yeah, so excellent question. The 100K guarantee, there's a few exclusions there that it does not cover. One of the ones, just to be very, very clear, so it doesn't cover any kind of extortion, any kind of fraud. If you pay the ransom in Bitcoin, that is a form of extortion. So they will not reimburse you for paying a ransom. It's not like you can, going to Amazon and showing the receipt. I mean, you're paying criminals a ransom, right? It's not a legitimate transaction, and therefore they will not cover that part of it. But everything else, they 100% cover it.
All right, third question. Do you see more and more ransomware moving away from C2 and more on the original download?
No, I don't think so. I mean, there is what I honestly think is going to happen is C2, they kind of have to use C2. I think that they're going to try to make C2s a little bit better and less detectable if they can. I really think there's going to be more investment being done on that side of it. But I think like C2 is kind of a must for successful attacks to happen. What I really see as a kind of original download or something that's going to initially get executed, and we already see this quite a bit, but it's more of what we call an agent. It's not really a malware, but it gets executed in memory. It's like a PowerShell script or something similar. And the reason why is because that agent can get on the system undetected. Your antivirus is not going to be able to detect it. No host protection will. And it can also actually disable your antivirus. And I actually had one of the webinars we did a quick example of this. And then once it's disabled, then that thing will communicate to the C2 server, and then download the real ransomware. But once the agent is on there, it owns the system. It can do anything. So at that point, without the user interaction, it could download a ransomware and execute it all without the user even touching it.
Beautiful. And another question: how is the endpoint agent coming along?
Our endpoint agent.
Hold on, let me meet this one.
Somebody is on the phone. So the endpoint agent, as you guys know, we've been heavily focused on OmniWAN and getting that out there. The endpoint agent, we have a kind of like an initial part of it working. And I actually don't know full details. I know that my engineer was supposed to demo it for me, so I'll probably get a demo here. I know he's tested it out on Windows, Mac, Android, and iOS. So actually, if somebody is interested in testing this, it is going to be only in our new environment, right? So the new environment. So for those that you don't know, with OmniWAN, you guys see it as OmniWAN. For us, there's a completely new architecture. The new architecture is BYOG OmniWAN. There's no cloud links in the new architecture, and that's where we're going to start adding all of the newer features. And the new architecture is the 100K cyber breach guarantee. So if you are on the new architecture via BYOG or OmniWAN, and you'd like to test out this agent, then we could probably get you hooked up and set up so you can start testing it. Currently, right now, you have to. It doesn't have the mechanism to where it'll, what I call a supervisor module, where it will go and detect if it's underneath MDS or not. It's just basically a always on environment. It connects to your environment.
Beautiful. And is the 100K guarantee valid in Canada? Is there a distribution agreement with someone in Canada so that I don't get hit with duties and onerous shipping and individual orders?
Yeah. So, you know what? I know we have it set up with the cloud links when we're shipping them. It's all taken care of, so you don't have to worry about it. And I just need to verify that with the Omni bridges to make sure there isn't. But yeah, for all of the services and everything, that's just for shipping the hardware. For all the services and everything, everything's valid in Canada. It's for the cloud services, there's no like state local taxes for that type of stuff. And also the cyber breach guarantee is valid in Canada as well. Currently, so everybody knows, if anybody is outside of US or Canada, it's only valid in the US and Canada.
Awesome. And are there plans for a new, more robust shield test?
Yeah, great question. We had S Pro for a while that we built, and then we were gonna work on it more, but we put that on pause as well. I started re-engaging a company, a development team on the other side of the world to start trying to look at doing something more with, like you said, a more robust shield test that would have a lot more, a lot more tests. The old Shield Test Pro, it still works, it's still there, and a lot of the pieces, they still work pretty well. So if you want to try it out, I'm happy to share it with you. And it does probably maybe around 30 tests or so. And somebody burped.
We're keeping it alive. It's Friday.
Yeah.
Let's see. So if you do want more information on our pricing, our partner program, please email sales@mydigitalshield.com, and we'll gladly get you that information.
And you guys feel free to speak up. I know, like, you can type in your questions, but if you feel free to ask them. Everybody's unmuted right now, so.
Another question here: would it be possible to get a file with confirms today? Yes, we'll be sending it out. If you're looking for the actual PowerPoint, it is rather large, so just email sales requesting for it, and we can send you a link to download it. And that concludes all the questions that are live right now. If you guys want to chime in or ask any questions, Ernest, I'll be getting in contact with you about the agent. Now's the time to really pick Andrew's brain and get any details that you might have had previously or that came up right now.
Or if it's Friday and you're like, I don't know what I'm going to ask right now, but you come up with it on Saturday or next week. Always welcome to reach out. Always happy to have these type of discussions and discuss this attack or any other types of attacks or just security in general. Love talking about just security philosophy in general and everything. So always feel free to reach out, and we're in it together. We're here to make security better as a whole, and it's a team sport, right? There's the good guys, the bad guys, and we're all the good guys. So we got to work together on it. It's not a hey, one person's working on it and the other person's not. It's really a team effort. It's we're trying to build a service that you can leverage and use to provide better security services to your customers. Your customers pay for it so that you can get better and do more of it, and then you pay us so that we can do better at it and do more of it as well. And it's just it's a circular effect, right? So let's keep the circle going. And that's in the same way, the feedback loop is the same thing, right? Just keep the feedback loop going. It's like provide information, and that's really how we get better at doing this as a whole.
And there's a question I missed, and I don't want to miss it. In the case of Petya that there is no recovery key or way to go back, how would the guarantee cover the customer? I'm guessing this is about the assurant coverage.
Yeah. So great question. There is a list of a lot of stuff. It's on our website. That things that are covered. So there is everything from recovery to systems to even PR to if you got it had to do with customers and their identity stolen, it'll cover all of the restoration services. So there's a long list of stuff that it actually does cover. So yeah, you'll be able to, in that case, it'll actually you'll be able to take advantage of a big chunk of the cyber breach guarantee. All right, is that our Friday starting? Friday afternoon?
I believe so.
For us East Coast guys?
I just wanted to say briefly, Andrew, this is Ernest. Thank you for providing this information to us. I'm really excited about MyDigitalShield. We've been testing it for a couple of weeks in our office, and it has been phenomenal. I really appreciate it.
No, thank you, Ernest. I appreciate that. All right, well, let's conclude this. And again, always feel free to reach out to us, and we're very happy to talk to you. And everybody, yep, thank you. Everybody have a wonderful weekend. Happy 4th of July and Canada Day.